That witch wanted me to crash, but only her Lexus will.
I'm a 34-year-old construction company owner in Portland, Oregon. And 3 years ago, I genuinely believed I'd finally made it in life after clawing my way up from absolute poverty. My childhood was rough. My father was a day laborer who drank himself to passing when I was only 12 years old. My mother worked cleaning houses until her hands literally bled, scrubbing toilets and floors for wealthy families just to keep us fed. I remember those days with painful clarity. The deep shame of wearing secondhand clothes that never quite fit, the constant gnawing hunger in my stomach, the freezing cold apartments where the heaters were always broken, and landlords never cared enough to fix them. I made myself a promise back then that I would never, ever live that way again. I put myself through community college while working 3 separate jobs simultaneously, sleeping maybe 4 hours a night, running on coffee and pure determination. Eventually, I started my own construction company with just a $5,000 loan from a contractor who saw something in me and believed I could make it work. 10 years of grinding later, I owned a successful business with 40 employees and major commercial contracts across 3 different states. I drove a modest pickup truck, lived in a comfortable but definitely not extravagant house, and kept most of my money carefully invested because I'd learned the hard way that real security matters infinitely more than flashy appearances. I met my wife Sarah at a charity gala event 3 years ago. She was absolutely stunning, blonde, polished, with one of those smiles that could genuinely light up an entire room. She told me she worked in marketing for a pharmaceutical company and seemed genuinely interested in who I was as a person, not just what I had. I was extremely cautious at first because women had shown sudden interest before, always coincidentally right around the time my business success became public knowledge. But Sarah seemed authentically different from all of them. She insisted on paying for dates herself, always wanted to split costs fairly, and constantly talked about building something meaningful together for the long term. We got married after dating for a year, and I honestly thought I'd finally found someone who truly understood me and where I'd come from. Looking back now with the clarity that only hindsight provides, I can see all the red flags that I completely missed at the time. Sarah consistently deflected any questions about her family background, vaguely claiming they were distant and she didn't like talking about them. She regularly received packages that she would quickly hide away before I could see what was inside. Her phone was always positioned face down on every surface, password protected, and she'd get genuinely defensive if I even glanced at it accidentally. When I suggested she might want to quit her job so we could focus on starting a family together, she became uncharacteristically defensive and angry, which should have been a massive warning sign. But I was completely consumed with work at the time, having just secured the biggest contract of my entire career, a massive $4.2 million renovation of the Riverside commercial complex downtown. The project would take 18 months to complete and would cement my company's reputation as a serious player. I was working 70-hour weeks regularly, coming home absolutely exhausted, barely able to keep my eyes open. Sarah had seemed so patient and understanding about my crazy schedule. Too patient, as it turned out. That particular Tuesday morning in September started like any other day. Sarah mentioned casually over breakfast that her Lexus was making some kind of strange, rattling noise and asked if I could take it to the mechanic since she had an important client meeting scheduled. I suggested she could just take my truck instead, but she insisted that the clients she was meeting expected a certain professional image, and showing up in a work truck wouldn't make the right impression. I agreed without thinking much about it and said I'd take it to Tommy's auto repair. Tommy had been my trusted mechanic for 8 solid years, since before I'd even met Sarah. He was a straight-shooting Vietnam veteran who'd seen enough nonsense in his life to last 3 lifetimes. He ran an honest shop, never tried to upsell unnecessary services, and had become something of a real friend over the years. I dropped Sarah off at her office downtown and drove her Lexus over to Tommy's shop. The waiting room was busy that morning, filled with the familiar mixed smell of strong coffee and motor oil. Tommy came out from the garage, wiping his perpetually greasy hands on an old rag, his weathered face breaking into a genuine smile when he saw me. "Long time, my friend. How's that massive Riverside project treating you?" he asked. I told him it was complicated but progressing well and explained that Sarah was hearing some kind of rattle, probably just a loose heat shield or something minor. Tommy nodded knowingly and told me to leave it with him for an hour or two. I walked to a nearby diner and set up my laptop, reviewing complex blueprints and construction schedules while fielding constant calls and emails. My phone buzzed continuously with the normal chaos. Subcontractors with questions, suppliers confirming deliveries, my foreman calling about some permit issue at the site. Just the usual organized madness of running a major construction project. 2 hours later, my phone rang again. It was Tommy's number, but when I answered, his voice sounded completely different. Tight, strained, almost shaking. "You need to come back to the shop immediately," he said in a tone I'd never heard from him before. I asked what was wrong and if it was going to be expensive to fix. "Just come back right now," he insisted, and then the line went completely dead. My gut immediately tightened into a knot. I'd learned over the years to trust my instincts, and every instinct was screaming that something was very, very wrong. When I got back to Tommy's shop, he didn't meet me in the main waiting area like usual. Instead, he led me through the back entrance to his small private office, a cluttered room with old metal filing cabinets, a coffee maker that looked older than both of us combined, and faded Marine Corps recruitment posters on the walls. Tommy was standing by the grimy window, watching the front parking lot through the dirty blinds with intense focus. When I entered the office, he immediately locked the door behind me. That's when I knew something serious was happening. Tommy had never locked that door in all the years I'd known him. "Why are you locking the door?" I asked, my heart starting to pound. "What the hell is going on here?" Tommy moved to his cluttered desk and carefully picked up a gallon-sized clear plastic bag. Inside was a burner phone, a small spiral notebook, and a glass vial containing white powder. My blood ran cold just looking at it. "I need to show you something," Tommy said, and I could hear his voice actually trembling slightly. Tommy never trembled. "But you need to understand. You cannot go home after this, you hear me? You absolutely cannot go back to that house." "What did you find?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "This," Tommy replied, holding up the bag. Hidden beneath the spare tire in a professionally constructed false compartment. Really good work, too. I only found it because I was rotating the tires and the weight distribution felt completely wrong to me. I stared at the items through the plastic, not fully comprehending what I was looking at. "I don't understand what this means." Tommy opened the notebook first with careful hands. Inside were handwritten notes in Sarah's distinctive looping cursive script that I'd recognize anywhere. The pages contained dates, times, and specific locations going back at least 3 months. I started reading with growing horror. It was my complete schedule documented in meticulous detail. My regular routes to work, exactly when I left the house each morning, precisely when I returned each evening, the names of specific bars I occasionally stopped at after particularly long days at work sites. "Keep reading," Tommy said quietly, watching my face. I flipped through more pages, and my blood literally turned to ice in my veins. September 15th, leaves for Riverside site at 6 a.m. sharp. Returns approximately 8 p.m., exhausted. Drinks exactly 2 beers, sleeps very heavy. Another entry read, September 18th, all-day meeting with material suppliers, gone entire day, perfect window of opportunity. Then, September 22nd, birthday dinner celebration, make it special and memorable, last one he'll ever have. The final page had just 2 words written in large letters. This weekend. Check the phone, Tommy said grimly. He powered on the burner phone, and it took a long moment to boot up. When it finally did, there were dozens and dozens of text messages between Sarah and a contact saved simply as M. I started reading them and felt my entire world completely collapse around me. M. Is everything ready on your end? Sarah. Almost there. He suspects absolutely nothing. Too busy and consumed with work to notice anything. M. The plan is solid. Car accident on Mountain Road. You're home alone with perfect alibi. Insurance company pays out full amount. We split the $2 million clean. Sarah. And what about the pills? M. In the vial I gave you. Fentanyl. Plant them in his truck immediately after. Cops will automatically think he was secretly using, drove impaired, lost control, open and shut case, no investigation. Sarah. When do we do this? M. This Saturday coming up. Brake line is easy to cut. He drives those dangerous mountain roads every week for the Riverside site inspections. Single vehicle accident, goes off cliff. I'll be with you the entire night. Perfect alibi for both of us. Absolutely foolproof. Sarah. What about Tommy? What if he finds something during regular maintenance? M. That's exactly why you send him to a completely different mechanic for the next service. Somewhere we can take care of Tommy too if he becomes a problem. My hands were shaking so violently I nearly dropped the phone. My wife, the woman I had married, trusted completely, built an entire life with, was actively planning to homicide me and frame me as a pill addict so that absolutely nobody would question the circumstances of my end. The powder in the vial, Tommy said, was almost certainly exactly what they claimed. Pure fentanyl, enough to eliminate 20 people easily. They were going to plant it in my truck after I was already dead. Cops would find it during the accident investigation. Case instantly closed. Just another successful businessman who couldn't handle the pressure started secretly using pills and died in a tragic but predictable accident. Nobody would dig deeper. "Who is M?" I managed to ask through my shock. "I got a name from digging through the message thread," Tommy said. "Marshall Dixon. Do you know him?" The name hit me like an actual freight train. Marshall Dixon, the smooth-talking project manager Sarah had introduced me to about 6 months ago at a company networking mixer. Expensive tailored suit, arrogant, confident smile, incredibly pushy about wanting to discuss potential business opportunities with my construction company. I'd been polite, but firmly declined his proposals. Something about Dixon had felt fundamentally wrong to me. Predatory, like a shark circling prey. Apparently, Dixon had found a different opportunity, one worth $2 million in life insurance money. "I know exactly who he is," I said quietly, then louder. "Why didn't you just immediately call the police?" Tommy sat down heavily across from me. "Because I'm a practical man, and I've seen how these things actually go down in the real world. She'll claim you planted all this evidence yourself. Dixon will have an airtight alibi arranged. Good expensive lawyers will completely tear apart testimony from a mechanic who just mysteriously found random evidence in a car. Maybe the charges stick, maybe they don't. But while you're fighting that legal battle, they might decide to panic and speed up their timeline, do something desperate. You could end up dead anyway." "So what the hell do I do?" I asked desperately. "You disappear," Tommy said flatly, his eyes hard as steel. "Right now, today, this instant. Empty your bank accounts completely before she can access them. Get somewhere safe, then you carefully plan how to bury these people so deep they never see daylight again." My mind was racing frantically, but everything Tommy said made perfect logical sense. If I confronted Sarah directly, she'd deny everything convincingly. If I went straight to the police with just the evidence from her car, it would be my word against hers. Dixon probably had connections and money for expensive defense lawyers. And if they felt cornered and threatened, they might do something desperate and unpredictable. "I need time to think," I said, my head spinning. "You need to act immediately," Tommy corrected firmly. "You've got maybe 2 hours maximum before she realizes something's wrong and starts asking questions. I'll tell her the car needed a specific part and I had to order it, buying you some time. But listen to me carefully. These people tried to homicide you. They were going to make it look like an accident, collect your money, and probably piss on your grave. Don't go soft. Don't give them any mercy. They damn sure wouldn't give you." I nodded slowly as my initial shock began crystallizing into something else entirely. Something cold, focused, and absolutely determined. I had built everything I had from literally nothing. I'd survived crushing poverty, my father's early end, my mother's slow deterioration from cancer. I'd fought for every single dollar, every contract, every shred of respect. And Sarah thought she could just take it all. End my life like it meant nothing? "I need your help," I said to Tommy. "You've got it, whatever you need. Can you keep this evidence somewhere completely safe? Somewhere she absolutely can't find it?" "Already planned on it. I've got a safe deposit box she doesn't know exists." I pulled out my phone and called my bank directly. My personal savings account held $340,000, money I'd been carefully saving to expand the business. My checking account had another $65,000. The business accounts had more, but those had my foreman as a cosigner and complex withdrawal rules that would take time to navigate. "I need to make a substantial withdrawal," I told the bank manager when she answered. "All of it. Today. Right now." I drove directly to my bank and withdrew $300,000 in cashier's checks made out to cash, plus $50,000 in actual $100 bills. The bank manager looked concerned and asked if everything was all right. I smiled easily and lied smoothly, saying I was buying specialized equipment for the Riverside project and needed to move fast on a time-sensitive deal. The manager, who'd worked with me for years and trusted me completely, processed the withdrawal without any further questions. From the bank, I drove to a storage facility I'd rented years ago for storing construction equipment and supplies. The unit was registered in my name only, paid annually by automatic withdrawal from a business account. Sarah didn't even know it existed. I stored all the money in a locked heavy-duty toolbox, then stood in the dim storage unit and made myself a detailed list of everything I knew and everything I needed to do. What I knew for certain, Sarah and Marshall Dixon were planning to eliminate me this coming Saturday. They would sabotage my truck's brake line. They would plant fentanyl to frame me as a secret pill addict. There was a $2 million life insurance policy. Sarah had been meticulously planning this for at least 3 months, maybe longer. What I needed: immediate safety, time to investigate thoroughly evidence that would actually hold up in court, and a way to destroy them so completely they'd never recover. I called my foreman Hector, my closest friend, and the person who'd worked with me since the very founding of my company. Hector was a stocky, reliable man with calloused hands and absolutely unshakable loyalty. "Hector, I need a serious favor, no questions asked." "Name it, boss," he replied immediately. "Tell everyone I'm taking an emergency personal leave. Family issue, very serious. You're in complete charge of the Riverside project for the next 2 weeks. Can you handle it?" There was a long silence. Then, "Of course I can handle it. But what's wrong? Are you in some kind of trouble? I can't explain right now, but I desperately need you to trust me. Can you do this?" "You know I can, but if you're in real trouble, I'm here. Whatever you need, I appreciate it. And Hector, if Sarah calls asking about me, you haven't heard from me at all. You're worried too. Understand?" Another pause. "All right, but you call me if you need backup. I don't care what kind of trouble it is." I ended the call and immediately made another one to my attorney, a sharp woman named Rebecca, who'd helped me with business contracts for years and understood the critical value of complete discretion. "Rebecca, I need you to prepare something for me urgently, a sealed envelope with specific instructions to be opened only if I die or go missing. Can you have it ready by this afternoon?" "That sounds ominous," she said carefully. "It's insurance, literal life insurance. I'll pay whatever rush fee you need. Come by at 3 o'clock, and be careful, whatever this is." I spent the next several hours writing everything down in meticulous detail. I documented the entire discovery at Tommy's shop, the complete contents of the burner phone, transcripts of the text messages, the fentanyl, Marshall Dixon's full name and background. I included dates, times, photographs that Tommy had taken of all the evidence. I wrote down account numbers, passwords, business information. If something happened to me, this would be my voice from beyond the grave, ensuring justice. At exactly 3 o'clock, I delivered the sealed envelope to Rebecca's law office. She locked it in her secure office safe, gave me an official receipt, and made me promise to check in with her every single week without fail. If I didn't check in, she would immediately open it and go straight to the authorities. By 4 o'clock that afternoon, I had effectively vanished from my normal life. I checked into a cheap motel 40 miles outside the city under a completely false name, paying entirely in cash. The room was dingy and smelled like stale cigarettes, but it was safe and anonymous. I bought a burner phone from a convenience store, then sat on the creaky bed and finally allowed myself to fully process what had actually happened. My wife genuinely wanted me dead. Not divorced, not separated. Dead. Homicided. For money. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have possibly imagined. I had survived my alcoholic father, my mother's end from cancer when I was 23, business failures, betrayals from supposed partners. But this was fundamentally different. I had trusted Sarah completely, loved her genuinely, imagined growing old together, and she had seen me as nothing but a paycheck, an obstacle to be permanently eliminated. My phone buzzed. Sarah calling. I ignored it. She called again immediately, then again. Text messages started pouring in. "Where are you? Tommy said you picked up the car. Call me. I'm getting worried." I turned off the phone completely. I needed to think strategically now. Disappearing had bought me precious time, but it wasn't nearly enough. Sarah and Marshall would either panic and try to flee, or they'd adapt their plan and come up with something new. I needed to stay several steps ahead of them. More importantly, I needed to completely destroy them, not just survive. Survival wasn't enough after what they'd tried to do. I opened my laptop and began researching Marshall Dixon extensively. What I found was absolutely enlightening. Marshall Dixon, age 42, worked as a vague business consultant, which seemed to mean he brokered deals and took commissions. He'd been married twice before, both marriages ending in messy divorces. One ex-wife had filed a restraining order claiming he was dangerous. He drove a leased Mercedes, lived in an expensive downtown condo, and according to his social media profiles, enjoyed living the high life. But he was drowning in massive debt. I found public court records showing Dixon was being sued by 3 different creditors for unpaid loans totaling $180,000. He'd borrowed heavily against his condo. His luxury car was leased, not owned. The expensive lifestyle was nothing but an elaborate facade hiding financial desperation. That explained the entire homicide plot perfectly. Dixon needed money desperately, and Sarah, with her access to my finances and a $2 million insurance policy, was the perfect target. Or maybe she'd approached him first. Either way, they'd found each other. Then I dug much deeper into Sarah's real background. She'd always been extremely vague about her past, vaguely claiming her parents were dead, and she had no siblings. I had accepted it, respecting what I thought was her privacy. Now I learned the disturbing truth. Sarah's real name wasn't even Sarah. She was born Stacy Winters in Reno, Nevada, and she had a criminal record. Arrested at 19 for check fraud, charges eventually dropped. At 23, she'd been questioned extensively in connection with an elderly man's suspicious passing, a wealthy man who had mysteriously changed his will to leave her $50,000 just shortly before dying of accidental carbon monoxide poisoning. No charges were ever filed. I felt physically sick. I had married an actual predator, someone who had clearly done this before, possibly multiple times. How many other sufferers had there been? How many men had she targeted, charmed, and destroyed? My burner phone buzzed. Only Tommy and Rebecca had this number. Tommy's text was brief. She knows something's wrong. Came by the shop asking questions. Told her I haven't seen you. Be extremely careful. I replied, thanks. Keep the evidence locked up safe. I'll be in touch soon. I spent the entire rest of that night planning my next moves carefully. I had money, I had time, I had solid evidence, and most importantly, I had the crucial element of surprise. Sarah and Marshall thought they were the hunters. They were about to learn they were actually the prey. By dawn, I had developed a comprehensive plan. It was risky, possibly illegal, and absolutely necessary. I was going to systematically burn their entire world down around them. I spent the first several days staying completely invisible. I stopped shaving and grew out my beard, bought cheap generic clothes from thrift stores, and carefully studied my enemies from the shadows. I'd parked my distinctive truck in a long-term airport parking lot and purchased a used Honda Civic with cash from a private seller. Completely nondescript and forgettable. Sarah was clearly panicking. I watched from across the street as she left our house multiple times, constantly making frantic phone calls, her face tight with obvious stress. She'd filed an official missing persons report and played the worried, devoted wife role perfectly for the police. I monitored the house remotely through a wireless security camera system I'd installed years ago. On the second night after my disappearance, I watched her on the phone, pacing frantically. He's completely gone, Marshall. Vanished. His truck is at the airport long-term parking, but there's absolutely no record of him flying anywhere. Marshall's voice came through, tinny but clear. I'd hacked into our home Wi-Fi remotely and was recording absolutely everything. Maybe he found out somehow, Marshall said nervously. How could he? The compartment was perfectly sealed. Nobody knew. What about that mechanic, Tommy? I went there. He said you picked up the car and left. Said you seemed completely normal. Then maybe he just needed space. You said he's been stressed with work. No, this is different. He took money, a lot of it. The bank called to confirm a huge withdrawal. Silence. Then Marshall, angry. How much? 300,000 from savings? Jesus Christ, Sarah, that was our money. It was his money in his account. I couldn't stop him. I smiled grimly listening to this. They were already starting to fracture. Perfect. I also hired a private investigator named Rick, who owed me a substantial favor. Within a week, Rick had compiled a detailed dossier on Marshall Dixon that was absolutely damning. Marshall had a clear pattern. He'd been involved with 3 different wealthy women in the past 5 years, all ending in suspicious circumstances. One woman's husband had died in a convenient boating accident. Another had divorced and moved out of state completely bankrupt. Rick found a woman named Christine who agreed to speak with me confidentially. We met in a public park. She was in her 50s, attractive but obviously wary. Marshall Dixon completely ruined my life, she said immediately. I was happily married for 20 years. Then Marshall came along as a business consultant. Charming, interested in my husband's company. He seduced me. 6 months into the affair, my husband died in a car accident. Brake failure on a mountain road? Sound familiar? She laughed bitterly. The police investigated but found nothing. Accidents happen, right? Marshall was so devastated, consoled me. We got closer. Then I learned my husband had a life insurance policy I didn't know about. $500,000. Marshall convinced me we were partners and I should share it with him. I gave him half. Then he just disappeared. Blocked my number. Gone. I tried going to police, but there was no evidence. Do you think he eliminated your husband? I asked. Christine met my eyes directly. I know he did. I can't prove it, but I know Marshall Dixon is a butcher, and he's going to keep doing it until someone stops him. Rick found other sufferers with eerily similar stories. The pattern was unmistakable. Marshall was essentially a serial butcher using charm and manipulation to get close to wealthy women, then eliminating obstacles and taking the money. After 2 weeks of careful planning, I made my move. I called Sarah from my burner phone, disguising my voice to sound panicked and stressed. Sarah, it's me. Don't say my name out loud. Someone's after me. I can't explain on the phone. I need to see you alone. Can you meet me? Silence. Then, of course. Where? The old Riverside construction site, the building we're renovating, tonight at midnight. Come completely alone. Don't tell anyone. If someone's following me, I can't risk it. You're scaring me. Just trust me, please. Midnight. I hung up before she could respond. I'd spent the previous night setting up wireless cameras and sensitive microphones throughout the construction site, positioned to capture everything. I needed them to confess on camera, something the police absolutely couldn't ignore. At 11:45 that night, Sarah arrived at the site, but she wasn't alone. Marshall Dixon was with her. My trap had worked even better than I'd hoped. They thought they were walking into their own ambush, with Sarah as bait and Marshall as backup muscle. I activated a speaker system I'd set up, playing a recorded message in my voice. I'm here, 3rd floor. Come up. They climbed the stairs cautiously. When they reached the 3rd floor, I cut all the main lights. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in eerie dim red. Through another concealed speaker, I spoke in my real voice. I know absolutely everything, Sarah. The burner phone, the plan to homicide me, Marshall Dixon, all of it. Sarah froze completely. Marshall grabbed her arm roughly. We need to leave immediately. Too late, I said through the speaker system. The police are already on their way. I sent them everything. It was a calculated lie. I wanted them to confess on camera first. Marshall's cool facade shattered completely. You stupid bitch! I told you that compartment wasn't secure. I did everything exactly right, Sarah shouted back defensively. Doesn't matter now. If he sent evidence to police, we're done. Marshall grabbed her shoulders hard. Listen to me carefully. We stick to our story. You don't know anything about any plan. I was just a friend. There's no real evidence. We'll claim he planted everything. Say he's paranoid and delusional. I'd heard enough incriminating statements. I activated the main industrial lights, flooding the entire space with harsh fluorescent brightness. You're not nearly as smart as you think, Marshall. I recorded everything. The cameras caught your entire confession. All of it. Marshall's face twisted with pure rage. He pulled out a gun from his jacket. Sarah screamed. What are you doing? Fixing this problem, Marshall snarled, aiming upward at me. The plan is dead. He knows everything. Our only option is to eliminate him here right now and disappear. I'd anticipated this possibility. I dove behind a thick concrete support pillar as he fired 3 times, bullets ricocheting off metal beams. But I'd also rigged a simple trap, a construction cable stretched across the stairwell at ankle height, invisible in the dim light. Marshall charged forward and hit it at full speed, going down extremely hard. The gun clattered away across the floor. I descended the opposite stairwell quickly and reached the main lobby just as Marshall staggered to his feet, blood streaming from a deep gash on his forehead. Sarah was backing away, absolutely terrified. Please, she begged. I didn't want this. Marshall forced me. Shut up, Marshall spat. Don't say another word. I faced them both calmly. It's completely over. Everything's recorded. The police have copies. My lawyer has copies. My investigator has copies. You can eliminate me, but it won't change anything. You're finished. Sirens wailed outside. Rick had called police as we'd planned. Marshall lunged desperately for the gun, but I grabbed a piece of rebar from a pile and swung hard, connecting solidly with his knee, The crack echoed. He went down screaming. Police flooded in moments later. I dropped the rebar and raised my hands. I'm the sufferer. Those two tried to homicide me. Everything's recorded. The cameras have it all. The interrogation lasted 6 hours, but I laid everything out methodically. The discovery at Tommy's shop, the text messages, Marshall's history, Sarah's real identity. I provided recordings, photographs, witness statements. They released me when everything checked out. The trial took 8 months. Marshall got 3 consecutive life sentences for multiple homicides. Sarah got 35 years. 2 years later, I received a prison letter from Sarah. Marshall had been eliminated by inmates who learned what he'd done. She wrote that she'd never been good enough for me, that I was decent and everything she wasn't. I burned the letter. I'd found peace not through forgiveness, but understanding some people are just broken. I'd rebuilt my life stronger than before. Every morning I woke up grateful to be alive. That was victory enough.